After casting off from Nuncio, I found myself amidst a sea of lilies. They were almost beautiful in their etherealness, gentle atop the sea. In many ways I wanted to simply relax and let the place take me, but I had heard stories of this. There is nothing in the Sea of Lilies save the prison of wisdom. The prison of wisdom is where all dark people are held. Prisoners who've escaped London, those who learned too many secrets, overzealous Z captains. I paid my respects to the prison to learn of it for the Admiralty, but I did nothing else. I left quickly, knowing that someday I too might either have to help someone be free or join someone inside. I found the Conate's main port, a little to the south of Wisdom. I decided rather than going in, I would just go around. The Conate had a lot of guns, and the port, though quite large, was not on land, but built around the water. It was a strange sight to see, and they were not entirely welcoming, with dreadnoughts patrolling the waters. I managed to avoid any altercations, though the memento mori still hungered for more ships to crash. I don't know how many pirates I'd sunk on the way here, each one more pitiful than the last. But I was doing a service in my own way. Khan's shadow lay to the south and to the east of Kante. Khan's shadow was not entirely at peace with its brethren. They were welcoming, surprisingly. It was a safe haven for foreigners such as myself to the Kanate's region. They had outrageous costs for fuel and supplies, but I was running low, so I paid it well. I popped into their tavern, learned what I could, and then decided to head back out again. Though it took much searching, I found Polythreme amidst the sea of voices. Such an unearthly place. There were giant skulls of stone in the water. My men could swear that they moved, laughing and jeering at us as we approached. I told them not to look, but the truth is, I'd seen it myself. My mechanic, my magician, my doctors, my gunners, and even the Carnelian exile. They all saw, too, those skulls laughing at us. None of us spoke of it, however. How could we? We needed to keep order on the ship. I found my way into Polythreme and took on a cargo of claymen. They were given freely, for they wanted work in London. They are not living things, after all, more like machines. I only needed the one, however, so I tossed the rest. Perhaps I would sell them in London again, if need be. A few claymen specifically made for engines. I decided to take these with me. Men fail, machines do not. While I was there, I picked up the cargo of the man with the one eye and the sharp knife. I do not know if I was comfortable with this, but he had paid me for it already. I had to deliver. Along the way, I decided to turn south, visit my way back to Port Carnelian. Along that journey, I found something a little unsettling, to say the least. It was a giant mushroom amidst a sea of other mushrooms growing out of the Z. The land in this subterranean realm was key for growing mushrooms, and those mushrooms were key for our wine and our fun, but this was unearthly. A sea of purple mushrooms with this giant mushroom in the center, and more than that, a monstrous village on top. Against my crew's better judgment, we put into port. The villagers were kind enough. They were shipwrecks and stowaways. They could not leave the island for fear of the Z-beasts, though they seemed oddly at peace with the strange spores and the mushrooms that grew around them. I gave them a little fierskin of honey, prisoner's honey, which takes you to the realm of dreams, and hoped that it might aid them in their times. In response, they gave me supplies and blemigans of all things. These unusual jellyfish-like mushrooms I had tried to destroy before, but those were hostile ones. This blemigan just seemed to bounce up and down on deck, quiet and docile. In many ways, I almost felt sorry for it, being thrown away so callously by the people of its home. Perhaps I'd find a home for it on my way back to London. I continued south until I reached the Elder Continent and Adam's Way. Odd place, Adam's Way. The only way to get in is if you have news of the outside, or perhaps of hell itself. And so, I gave them some of the news I had of London, and they gave me a shree. As the day passed, the petals would fall, and when they had all fallen, it would be time to go. I met an unusual woman there, the Presbyterite adventuress. She seemed to be desperate to get free of the place. Well, she seemed to have a story to tell and was a good hand with the guns, so I took her along. Along the way, my brisk campaigner and I joined a hospital and gave some aid to those in need. I bought a little bit of coffee on the way and decided to take it back to London. The adventuress, seeing this, decided to have dinner with me of all things. She told me a bit of her time, her escape from the Elder Continent, and then I bested her in an arm wrestling contest. It was no easy feat, believe me. Though she was a woman, she was incredibly strong. It was not just physical strength either, it was the weight of experience. If anything, I'd say I got quite lucky. Or perhaps it was age. She began to mutter as she left that she was old. Far too old. Along my way to Port Carnelian, I saw the dreaded Blue Prophets who scream out the names of those dying. I tried to engage them, but I almost lost all of my crew and my new ship. I managed to flee into a fog bank and lose them. It was by no means heartening. I took respite in Visage. Though I had already seen much of what there was to be, I enjoyed playing the role of the locust or the frog. And then the moon moth. I enjoyed my little playhouse when I was there. It helped to relieve the stress of the Z. I put in at the Iron Republic for fuel and decided to drop off my Blemmigan. Hell may not be a great place for it, but at least it was civilized. Ironically, it seemed as if another was waiting for me, and this one joined my crew as well. Both Blemmigans with me, looking as if something unusual had just happened. And it had. Well, I'm sure I can find a better place for them. I put in at the salt lines again. With my hull almost empty, I decided I would take some of the Sphinx Stone with me, try and make some extra cash at London, and I dropped off a Blemmingan as well. I paid a visit to Hunter's Keep with my last clayman. My mechanic was anxious. He knew this might be something special. I knew very little of it. He told me of a pool beneath Hunter's Keep, and the three sisters led me to it. Phoebe opened the door, but she would not follow me in. I can't say I really blame her. It was an unearthly place. It was a tiny pool with dream serpents within there. The mechanic used the clayman and an empty mirror catch box that I had acquired on my travels, and built himself a snake trap of sorts. There's no real way to explain just how uneasy I felt. But I had promised to help him, and I sought sales of the Z. Why not? I left a Blemmigan in the chamber as well. Perhaps it would find hope there, where it had none elsewhere. Before I left, I took lunch with the sisters again, this time favoring Phoebe once again. She was much more melancholic this time. Told me of tales of lovers parted and brought together, and of storms yet to come. I must admit, time passed quickly, and though I was not cheerful this time, I was at least intrigued. We put into London with barely any fuel, barely any crew, and barely any supplies. But barely is different than none. As we put into port, a group of armed brigands jumped my ship. Can you believe it? They were after the Presbyterite adventuress. There was nothing to do. She was part of my crew now, so we set upon them. 4 of my men lost their lives that day. The Presbyterite adventuress fought like a demon with pistol and sword, and I, with what cannons and what expertise I had, we pushed the assassins back, but I was in no mood for games. I demanded an answer. The adventuress told me that she was far older than she looked, far older than the dead, hundreds, maybe thousands of years old. It was her people. But she was being hunted because she was not supposed to live so long. It was her time to die. She seemed to accept that, though I doubt I could have. She wanted to die as a true adventuress, in battle for her life. A place where someone might remember her and speak of her tales. I agreed to help her find this way. Perhaps it was sympathy. Perhaps it was because she reminded me of my father. Either way, I could understand wanting to be remembered. After all, when I went to London, I was remembered. I saw the likely lass again, Marina. She claimed to not be at the docks looking for me, but we had dinner nonetheless, and it was a little bit harder to leave again. The Z may be my first passion, but Marina is closing in, I have to admit. I made good on my promise to the one-eyed man with the very sharp knife. The blind bruiser was paid in the cargo, and I was paid in supplies, fuel, and echoes. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. I sold my Sphinx stone and had a bare amount of echoes in my coffers. I used what my father had taught me and the relics of Palmerston to create a monstrous almanac. It told me much of the Z and of the monsters that lay there. It would be useful in my journeys. Finally, before we decided to head out again, I decided to speak with the mechanic. Can you believe it? The man never slept. Something in his dreams was fearful, but he asked me to lay out the serpent trap that I had created with him as he slept. I did so with a few crewmen to watch, though it seemed as if nothing would happen. I was awakened from my own nap by a shout from my crew. The mirror catch box I had put within the clayman's hands was glowing a bright green. With some effort, we managed to pull the clayman away from the mechanic, and when he awoke, a smile was on his lips. I asked him what in the name of all the hells was going on, and he told me that we had just captured dream snakes after his secrets. Now, I am familiar with the snakes of dreams, but still, this was a bit much. However, he told me he knew the secret of a powerful engine, and that he would give it to me freely so long as I helped him to make it. While I may have been skeptical, my ship does run quite slow. And this is an adventure. Why not? I agreed to help him with his journey, and he agreed to bestow me upon the world's greatest engine. Before we put out to port, I decided to take the fish I had drawn from Mutton Island and have dinner with my Nacretius outcast. Though the rubber man was not much for words, he seemed very little able to speak. He told me that he was once loved, but that he had been abandoned at Port Cecil and taken in by the living coral. A little pity filled my heart for the man. Though he was on my crew, he truly had no home, no place where he could call his own. That glowing scar was a constant reminder. I don't know what's going to happen to him when this journey is over, though I imagine I will try and look out for him as best I can. He's one of us now. With my heart a bit heavier than I would like, I decided to take off from London. I had rested. It was time for more adventures on the open Z.